I'm Felix, and for those who were here last week, this is a repetition, but I coordinate the OECD DevCom network, which is a network for government officials to share lessons and insights on how to communicate about development and for development. And well, that's about it. And I'm really happy to be here today with Marte from NORAD. Marte.
Hi everyone. I work in NORAD, the Norwegian Development Cooperation Agency. I've been working as a campaigns manager for a few years now, and I've been working closely with Felix in the OECD DevCom communications network.
Thank you, Marta. And so thanks also on my behalf also for the organizers for having us here. And I really loved last week's event and to hear some perspectives from the different countries and the different organizations that are here today. And I hope we have time to hear from lots more today. So the idea is to have some group discussions and some group exercises later on. So we'll try and push on with the presentation now and not take up too much time with presenting. So if we could pull up the PowerPoint presentation, please. And go straight to the overview slide. So what we thought we'd do, Marta and I, is provide a quick sort of overview of the new context for communicating development today. So what are the kind of sort of in which ways has communicating development changed in the last few years, and what does that mean for us as communicators? And then think about what that means in terms of goals that we need to be setting in development communications. And finally, share some thoughts and ideas and approaches on how we can all increase our communications impact. So if we can jump straight into the new context for communicating development, please, the next slide. So Oni is doing the slides, is that right? Whoa, uh-oh. I was going to deliver that slide, but I think my computer has caught a virus. Okay, I'm getting one smile in the chat, and that's exactly as many smiles as I expected for this silly joke. The point is, yeah, if you have to ask what's new for development communication, well, the virus is all over the place, isn't it? We've had a lot of conversations in the DevCom network about how busy the virus has kept us because, well, we've been promoting good behaviors and encouraging our audiences to help adopt behaviors that contain the virus. We've also been sort of fighting fake news about the virus. We've been reassuring people that we're doing a good job in trying to address the impact of the virus, whether that's in health or looking at the longer term effects of this crisis. And then we've been thinking longer term about, well, hasn't the virus shown us that development work and development cooperation and multilateral cooperation is more important than ever? So we've been thinking about longer term narratives and developing longer term messaging about development. But in many ways, this virus has simply accentuated trends that have been going for a long time already in the world of development, and maybe we can get this virus out of here again for a while, because, you know, with any luck, we'll be moving on from it again next year or beyond. Who knows what the time frame is right now? So these three trends we've been looking at a lot in the DevCom network in policies, politics, and technologies. And well, I won't spend too much time on this slide. I think the point is that we have, for several years now in the development community, adopted a universal agenda that is valid for all countries, whether they are donors or not donors. In fact, we've even in the context of the SDGs abandoned language about donors. We have a very holistic agenda that encompasses many different sectors that are all interconnected in new ways. And this is a whole of society new policy agenda that concerns many actors. So for us as communicators, this is a more complex story to tell, to get across. And it's also more complicated to position where ODA sits in the overall policy landscape. So, and where we as institutions sit and how we relate to other actors. In terms of politics, well, I mean, many countries, obviously, we've been following the sort of the news, and we see how in many countries the political debate has become very polarized and highly charged. We witness in many countries falling levels of trust in public institutions, but also falling levels of trust in international institutions and international cooperation, especially from people who actually conflate globalization with international cooperation. So, you know, associate economic globalization with the work that we do. So they have a general mistrust of international cooperation and anything that is international. On the other hand, there's some great things happening and very positive things happening. People want change. We see many people on the streets. Our issues, gender equality, climate change, inequality, in general, our issues are all over the news, and there are activists out there demanding change from political, from business leaders, and well, this goes into our direction as organizations. But the big challenge in this political landscape is that we need to be nimble. We need to find ways to balance national political debates and global political debates, and we need to find the right partners to support and work with to manage our communications. And then finally, well, technology. I know that next week's webinar is about social media and digital media, so I won't go into details here, but of course, we see with the proliferation of communications technologies, we see people getting their news from more and more different sources, which means our communications teams need not just new skills and ways of communicating digitally, but actually it's a whole new way of communicating. It's a whole different nature of what communications is all about. So what does all this mean for us? Well, in DevCon, we've been thinking about 4 different goals that all communicators need. And maybe we can move to the next slide, please. And I won't go into detail here. The 4 goals that, in our view, communicators need to have on their mind in their strategies are to raise awareness, to change attitudes, to promote action, and to seek advice. And actually, these goals, I mean, it represents 2 big shifts for communicators in development organizations. One is that they're shifting from communicating about ODA and raising awareness about ODA to communicating about sustainable development and international cooperation. So that's one shift in terms of the subject that they're trying to raise awareness about. The other big shift is that they're shifting from awareness raising to more active engagement and promoting involvement among their audiences in the sustainable development agenda. And in both of these ways, we see that communications has really become core business for development organizations. If an organization does not enjoy the trust of citizens or of its audiences, then it will not have a license to operate. It cannot do what it's trying to do. And if development organizations today do not manage to mobilize audiences, different actors, into action for the SDGs, then it will also not be able to achieve its development objectives. So, Marte, I guess I'll throw it over to you. Tell us a little bit about goals and how you see them at NORAD.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Marte from NORAD, and we have been working on these kind of goals for quite a while. So our goals is generally very broad. So we're communicating the results of the Norwegian ODA, what we have done, communicating the Norwegian development cooperation policies, like what we want to do, and also engage and enlighten the Norwegian public on the Sustainable Development Goals, which are in all of these, but most in raise awareness and promote action. The ODA and the policies, the Norwegian policy, development policies, communications are what we used to do a lot, and now we're moving towards the SDG communications. We started, of course, to do that in 2015, 2016. Our large campaigns, our large efforts toward a broad audience is generally on the SDGs and to promote action and raise awareness. But you still have to do some communications on the policies and also on the results of what you have done with your ODA. So we try to do that online mostly. I think the way we have focused our SDG communication and why we've had a lot of focus on it is because our Prime Minister is heading the UN SDG advocacy group, and it's been really important for her to engage the Norwegian public in the SDGs. And since Norway and NORAD has been working, of course, with the SDGs in the field, it was easy for us to take on that task. Of course, the challenge is that our work in practice is abroad, but the SDGs are as much about what we do at home and also about what you do abroad. So that's the challenge with the communicating the SDGs, but the good thing about communicating the SDGs is that it makes us more accountable, like our policies in general must be more coherent, and it also brings the topics of the communication closer to home. The SDGs are goals that aren't supposed to be about what you do in Africa or Latin America, but it's about what we as a whole world must do and reach. So it's actually easier to raise awareness and promote action when you could talk about the whole world as one. But I think also it might be a shift back to communicating a bit more about the ODA now. This is not something that has started yet, but I think with the economy being, on the going down, and it's going to be more fight over the budget for everyone, also in Norway. So I think we have to go back and probably communicate more about the results and the importance of the policies, and probably we will focus on the global things like vaccines and climate change, where we have to stand together and work together to actually reach a goal. Felix?
It's interesting, Marta, always to hear from you, because you really illustrate that sort of the dilemmas of in communication strategies. Yeah, we do sense a trend now to communicate more, for example, about the national interest that countries might have in having ODA programs. So, which I think we can get to a little bit more when we discuss some of the framing issues later in the presentation and in the small groups. All right, so next slide, please, Oni. So just to let everybody know that at DevCom, we're working on something we're calling the sort of a DevCom toolkit for sustainable development communicators. And it's structured around three different communication challenges. One is making good strategic choices. So setting goals for your strategies, choosing the right narratives, and targeting the right audiences. The second set of challenges related to sort of adopting modern campaigning practices. So how do you frame messages and choose messengers? What channels should you use? What formats should you be using to get the message across? And then finally, it's recognition that to do good communications work, you need a good enabling environment for that. You need supportive conditions for that. You need resources and skills, you need partnerships, and you need a lot of knowledge. So we're currently, in the next few months, we'll be publishing this toolkit in several different parts on the SDG Communicator website, where you see the URL at the bottom of the page. There's not enough time to go through all of these items. So for the rest of the presentation, just thought we'd highlight 3 approaches that are emerging in the DevCom network that communicators can consider. So next slide, please, about the 3 approaches. Well, the first approach, the first thing that we think everyone needs to do is to get a much better understanding of who our audience is. Our audience is very diverse, and we have very different objectives vis-a-vis different audiences. And if you go to the next slide, please, you can see how we're trying to, we've created a little typology of audiences there. We've divided them into mobilizers and influencers, so people who can help carry your messages forward within civil society and municipalities, schools, and businesses. But then there are also the watchdogs, so the people who are looking at your organization's budget and I'm making sure that you're doing good work with that. So these might be the media or parliaments, but also campaigners and your international partners out there with whom you've signed, your organizations have signed contracts. And then there is this concept of the general public. So I still hear lots of people when I ask them, what is your audience? They say, oh, we target youth and schools and the general public. But then they don't go further and explain what they actually mean by the general public. And the time, I think, for this concept of the general public is over. And maybe Marta can tell us a little bit more about how they divide their audiences and segment them in Norway.
Yeah, as you know, Felix, both our goals and our target audience are picked by the politicians. So that's why we also get the target audience, the general public. But as communications people, we have to deconstruct that and look into what part of the general public do you want to reach with our messaging, because it's actually quite impossible to reach the whole general public, everyone. Something that is quite common is to divide the public into age groups and genders. But we are actually trying to get a bit away from that, to reach maybe even broader groups of people, but not only, you know, the youths or only females or only men, which is, I think, starting to be quite uninteresting groups. We're more looking into what are the big common things that people we reach. If you want to reach a large group of people, like you want to do in a campaign, you want to see, like with the SDGs, we were looking for who is interested in nature and climate. And we found one of the largest organizations in Norway, which is the Norwegian Trekking Association. Norway is not a very big country. We're just below 6 million people. But this association has a lot of members, almost 500,000 members in Norway. And trekking is something that it's quite common. A lot of people do, both genders, all age groups. So we partnered up with the Norwegian Trekking Association and made an SDG campaign with something we called the Enlightenment Track for the SDGs that I think Felix is sending a link on. And then we could reach out to a large group of the general public with the messaging on sustainability. And that really resonated with a group of people that you know, we're interested in keeping the nature clean and the air clean, and also, you know, walking, trekking, being fit. So I think that was a really interesting audience to work with. And also, you know, we could talk to the managers and the people in the organization about how our messaging was resonating with them. Another campaign we've been working on has been a campaign on climate change and how the rainforest is important to stop climate change or limit climate change. A lot of Norwegian aid money actually goes to a large project, several different projects on saving the rainforest. And it's a part of our climate change programs. And we wanted to reach a lot of people with that messaging. So we looked into actually at this time we were interested in age groups as well. We were interested in young adults and students, but we also wanted to see what's common with what actually brings them together. So we used we used information and data from Spotify, which is one of the largest music online apps in Norway, at least, a lot of other places as well, and found that they were united on some kind of type of music, which we called the tropical house at that time when we did this. So we based our whole project on the music that the target groups liked. And I think it's important to actually look into that kind of data that you could find in media monitors and public statistics and population surveys. But it's also actually quite interesting to do like small qualitative analysis of your target groups. One of my colleagues always said that he tested his messaging on his sister. She was a teacher in a small town in Norway. She was smart, but not a part of the elite or, you know, foreign affairs people that we work with on a daily basis. So if she understood his messaging, you know, he knew he was on the right way. So it's always nice to actually, it's quite an unscientific check. It's small, but it can be quite rewarding to check your films or your messaging with a small group of people that kind of represent the people that you want to reach, I think.
Thanks, Martin. I shared a link to a couple of stories about campaigns that Marta has led and that have been very successful, where she also talks about audience segmentation and the use of data to improve and target your communications better. So if we move to the second approach or idea that we'd like to throw out there, which is to work with partners. We've mentioned it several times already in this presentation. It came up also last week. In today's communication context, you can no longer get the message across alone. You can't expect people to come to your website or to follow you. You have to work with partners. The reason is, well, there are three really good reasons here. The first is that partners help you tell the full story. Development is not just about the public sector development institution. Development is a much bigger story, and there are many partners who have powerful, great stories to tell that you need to use to get your messages across. The second reason is that partners enjoy trust and reach within specific audiences. So here the examples are, you know, if you're wanting to reach young consumers, well, as Marta did, you know, you might want to work with DJs and social media influencers. If you want to work with investors, obviously you reach out to business partners. And you want to work with activists if you want to mobilize the masses for issues like gender equality or climate change. Because these audiences are not immediately going to trust messages if they come just from your organization. So the third reason is that they can teach you new skills. So we see this in DevCom a lot. We have international campaigners come in, graphic designers, or representatives of business who have all sorts of different communication skills that we often don't have in development organizations. So this is another way of bringing these skills in. Marta, I think we're running a bit late, so I don't know if you have anything to add on the sort of the issue of partnerships, but if maybe just a short one, so we can move to the third step.
Yeah, I was just mentioning, you know, we're working on with the Trekking Association, and one great thing about that partnership that as a state actor, we don't have any volunteers to do our work for us. So it can be quite expensive if you need a lot of people. Mm. But that's a good way of saving money, is to work with an association with a lot of members and volunteers. We had over 100 volunteers working for us at sometimes parts of the campaigns. So that was very useful with that kind of partnering. And it's a lot of money you could save on partnering because they have resources that you don't have, and with partnering you could you know, use those resources.
Well, this is a very compelling argument in times of crisis, that you need to save money. So we absolutely need to change this graphic to to reflect that fourth really important point on saving money. Thanks, Marta. So if we could have just the next slide then, please. So, and I think this might be the most important message that's emerging from this DevCom work, which is that we just have to update our narratives and frames about development. The time of the white savior Barbie going and helping helpless people in developing countries, that kind of frame about development is gone. It has to go. It's no longer appropriate. It's not accurate. It doesn't actually help, because it promotes stereotypes, and it promotes a sort of an us and them mentality in our audiences. So although some people might be drawn to this kind of narrative, it's unhelpful in many ways. So there are so many other options out there about how you can frame your work about development. So if we could go to the next slide. So these are just 4 different options that you might want to choose when talking about development. The first approach might be a community-based narrative, saying, well, we're in this together. And this was very popular. We heard this a lot during sort of the peak of the health crisis. We're a global community. We have goals that we need to tackle together. We share values, and we share responsibilities to make change happen. Another approach might be to focus on results. So you need data to show that you're doing a good job as an organization, and you have to, and you combine that with stories, success stories, or just stories about how you've learned and how you're doing in order to show that development works. A third option might be to focus more on actions, and specifically what I mean there is actions that of your audience. So give your audiences the tools they need in order to help contribute to achieving sustainable development. And the fourth narrative choice might be around issues. So this is more related to development education, teaching people through the formal education system and through informal education and campaigns about why the work that we're doing is really important and how it is in everyone's interests at home and abroad. So on the final slide, and this is to open up the group discussions, we have 10 principles in messaging on development. I don't want to go through each of them now, but the point here is that when we frame messages, here's a kind of a useful checklist to think about whether we're framing messages correctly. And well, I see a message from Saran, who seems to be back. So this is maybe good timing, because the idea was now to break into some small groups and to discuss these do's and don'ts. The point here is to be positive and inspire people rather than fear-mongering. The point is to be to be humble. You can admit that things can go wrong. You don't need to sugarcoat all of the work that you're doing. You need to engage both hearts and minds, show respect, be useful to audiences. So Saran, are you here? Because I think I don't know, Marta, if maybe you have some final thoughts to share, but otherwise I'd invite Saran to introduce the small groups.
Felix, can you? Yeah. Can you hear me?
We're a bit late.
Yeah, that was what yeah, apologies everyone. It was really sad that I came to the office for the most secure internet and then it crashed. So I was wondering, Felix, if we should do the breakout groups, looking at the time. Perhaps we could ask if people could stay a little bit longer and then we can do the breakout groups. What do you think?
I'm happy either way. We can have an open discussion now. Maybe that'll save us a lot of time.
Yes, perhaps that would be better if we do the plenary discussion like this, looking at our do's and don't messaging on the screen. I would suggest. Yeah. Sure.
So I'd love to hear from some of the participants on sort of their messaging and some of some of the comments and questions they might have on how they message for development. Does anybody have any immediate reactions to share? Yeah.
Or actually questions, right? Because
absolutely
presentation, and maybe there are some questions as a follow-up, perhaps.
Hello, Hanna Siskova again from Prague, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Maybe I would like to raise a question to everybody, all participants. How do you actually handle the point admit that things can go wrong? I would like to hear from the audience if they have any plans or any communication strategies on that point that I would like to learn. Thank you.
Great question.
Can I respond to this? I mean, based on what I've seen in some of the examples. So I think, I mean, usually it's still presented from what I've seen as communication from different development agencies. It's usually presented again through some lessons learned or how an agency actually changed its way of doing something. So it's not necessarily like saying that we screwed it up, but it's rather like we did it this way and now it's actually how we changed our approach and how we again did brilliant things. I mean, that's maybe again putting it in a promotional way, but I think still it would be easier to give it in a positive manner again, saying and also linking with some lessons learned as much as possible. That's one immediate reflection that I had.
Thank you very much. So rather to communicate it through agencies and with the positive outcome, lessons learned, as I understood your recommendation or experience so far.
Just my inputs.
This reminds me of discussion we had in the network about how you communicate about corruption. And this is a very common question from communicators because there's a very commonly held sort of misconception that that aid seems to be much more corrupted than other sectors, which isn't true. But many of the communicators do exactly what Berna just said, which is you can be open about cases when they arise. You have to demonstrate what you've learned from it and what you're doing to prevent it from happening again. And also anticipate negative news before that. So have the tools ready when sort of negative messages begin appearing. So it's better to be on the front foot, and it builds confidence among people when you're open about the fact that not everything is rosy, and about the challenge also that we as development organizations face. There's a question in the comments about choosing the right partners. I have a thought on that. Marta, how do you choose your partners?
Yeah, actually that's something we're discussing all the time, especially when we're doing an SDG campaign as we're doing now. We're doing a new SDG campaign where we're trying to reach out really broad and get partners on board from a lot of businesses as well, and organizations, and also state actors. So we try to look at the ones that are actually has a strategy to reach the SDGs, and that has some really good plans and want to do something to work with the public to reach the SDGs. But it is really hard because nobody is perfect, not businesses, not organizations. So there might be debates and, you know, negative comments on the partners. So I think we have to be really strong to just, it's important to include everyone, you know, in the SDGs. And especially the ones that want to work for a better world. So it is important to have some basic guidelines, but then also be open, because you could reach a lot of audiences through the partnerships. One of the partnerships we're doing now in the campaign is one of the largest grocery lines in Norway to actually reach consumers with the SDGs. So of course this shop is not perfect, but they really want to do something, and they have a good plan to be a part of the SDGs and a part of the solution. So we're going to try to do this partnership.
Sydney has her hands up, right? Sydney, you want to answer?
Not actually answer, just one example on corruption and communicating. And I remember a donor who was facing corruption in one of its programs, and in its communication, it basically said, well, we've identified it and we've done something about it, so the system works. And so it turned out in a positive manner, thing that we've been able to identify it, so the accountability and transparency systems are actually functioning. But the question is more on a question we have a lot from countries we're working with is the question of communicating with parliaments and parliamentarians. And if you had some guidance on that, I think to be welcome.
Well, maybe just quickly one more word on the partnerships thing. I shared a link to an event we organized on partnering, and one of the ideas that came up is that you need to find the organizations that already have operational partnerships with your organization, so that you're not doing all of the partnership searching yourself. So you go and see your colleagues who are working with NGOs in project delivery or who have business partnerships going, and then to see how communications can become a part of those partnerships that your organization already has. Sydney, on your question about communicating with parliaments, yeah, there are, I guess, a mix of, I can also share another event summary that we organized about how you communicate with parliaments, but the main point was that it's about relationship building, much more so than about choosing which kind of format you package your results report in, or You know, whether you need to reach out on which social media channel. Of course, that's all very important in terms of reflections. These are crucial, but the main point there was finding sort of the right entry points to engage with parliamentarians. I'll look for the link now, and I can share that also in the box. Any other comments and questions? I see Mehmet put added a comment in the chat. Maybe if they would like to speak up and share this comment in person. Okay, you have a mic problem. But I think thanks for your giving us the thumbs up for the do's and don'ts. I agree with what you're saying about demonstrating that that you're there to share. Again, I guess it's about mixing the, you know, you're there to share, but maybe you know, there's this point about being humble, which is that you always need to be careful that you're not over-promising or that you know, that you're not the one who can solve all of the world's problems and has all of the solutions at hand. So there's that balance to strike always. Before we finish, I'd love to, I wonder if any of participants have on the top of their head or in front of them any kind of slogans that or sentences that capture how their organization communicates about development. It would be very interesting to hear if anyone would volunteer that. If you know, what's the one line that it says about your work on your webpage, or when your minister just spoke about development in a speech, what was the one sort of convincing argument that they brought to explain why this development work is so important?
For the UNDP, we all know the resilience nations. I see that Berna was about to say the same thing, I guess.
So
Resilience.
maybe I would share the slogan that the Czech Development Agency has, which is an agency constituted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And they have a slogan on the front page, Czechia helps.
Mm-hmm. Short and sweet. I've just remembered another insight from some public attitudes research that was done in the UK, Germany, France, and the US about messaging during the coronavirus, during the crisis. And the word vulnerability came up a lot. That it's really about connecting with people at home and abroad, and demonstrating that that there are problems that are shared across countries and that we need to tackle together. So vulnerability rather than destitution, for example. Also, we have Czech helps, and now from Turkish Tika we have all for a smile. It's a very nice positive way to bring the discussion to a close, actually. Does anybody volunteer to top that?
I guess it's hard to top that one, right? Because it's so simple and so positive.
Yeah, and it's made several of us smile. I can see lots of people have their videos turned off, but I'm sure they're smiling right now too.
Yeah, that's great. Felix, I was looking at the time. I'm sorry. Should we wrap? Because I cannot guarantee that my internet will stay on. So it may crash any moment. I'm using my cell phone now, and it again now crashed. So should we wrap, Felix?
It sounds good to me. So I guess I'd just like to finish on an invitation that it's wonderful to have been able to get a chance to meet this community. We have regular DevCom activities, so so I'm very excited about this group here sharing lessons together more in the future. And you know, please, if anybody is interested in joining the DevCom group and finding out more, then please do contact me. I'm sure Saran, you can share my contact details, and I'd love to stay in touch.
Great, thank you so much, Felix. I think that was great, and I would encourage everyone to visit the website of the DevCom and the SDG communicator. I think the link was shared, and we will share it again in SparkBlue and again. It's really, really resourceful, very rich resources that you can find on communications for development. Thank you, Felix.